Yeah. I'll, let me just unmute the room. Conversation. That's feedback on that. Wow, that's testing. He was going to have his.
Are you ready? 2 minutes. We said that about 2 minutes ago. While we set up the live stream, I'll say welcome. Welcome everyone to this session, the London Architect Trailblazer Group. I'm going to say this again as soon as we start live streaming, or at least Tom will. But for those in the room, welcome. I know. Everybody can hear you. Again. Oh, you can? Okay, cool. Brilliant. From Romania to America, to Copenhagen, actually Denmark, all over the place. Excellent. We're a global community of architects. With that, I'm going to hand over to Tom.
Okay, well, no pressure. Yeah, thanks for joining, everybody, whether you're here or in person. It's great to kind of come together and talk about the different flavors of architects, really. And that is exactly what we are here to do today. So in terms of agenda, this is our rough agenda. We started a little bit later than expected, which is fine. So the session is kind of portioned off into 2 sections. The first section, hoping to start at 6:45, our live Q&A for about half an hour, and then we're going to have a break, and then we're going to do another half an hour, and then we're going to wrap things up. And we want this session to be kind of as interactive as possible. So feel free to ask any questions, whether that's in person or via the chat or the Q&A in Zoom. We will just be monitoring the Q&A though for any questions that we pick. Yeah. And now we hand over to Own Backup. Yeah.
So just thanks to you guys. Thanks to Own Backup for hosting this.
I'll keep it very brief. Thank you for coming. We are Own Backup, who hopefully most of you will know who we are. Very quickly, and apologies to everyone online. For those of you in the room, just quick housekeeping. Bathrooms are out the door, back the way you came in. Fire exits are also back out the door and towards the back. I am a fire marshal. That should put the fear of all things holy into you. So let's hope we don't need to do any of that. But yeah, if you have any questions about the space or anything like that, please let me know. But enjoy the session.
Excellent. So yes, thank you, Own Backup, for hosting us. It's as those of you who are here in person can attest to, it's a fantastic venue. Great sort of auditorium style and loads to eat and drink and so on. For those of you online, I hope you've got your own drinks and you're sat comfortably in your pajamas or whatever, enjoying it. So, excellent. So we're going to go straight into are we doing the intro?
After this.
After this,
Yeah.
right. We'll do ground rules first because we can't have enough rules. This session today is going to be all about architect careers. And as Tom said, we want this to be as interactive as possible. You know, we want you guys to have the opportunities to ask the questions that you've had burning about how to either make a career in architecture, how to move into that sort of a space, or how do, you know, what are the different flavors of architects, a bit like crisps, and what are they typically concerned with? What do they, you know, do day to day? You know, who do they work with? Things like that. Okay, so we want you to leave this session understanding that architecture is not something over there that you can't achieve. That actually there's more to it, and actually there's more opportunity for you than you may have thought. Okay, so let's break down those barriers. Let's demystify the subject area, and you know, hopefully you'll feel empowered to explore it a bit more after this session. Okay, so we will do a live Q&A with a number of panelists, and we'll introduce them in just a minute. There are some rules that we want to stick to just to make sure that we're, you know, keeping pace and it's as valuable as it can be for you. So please do wait. We've got, you know, some questions that we will introduce and sort of spread out through the discussion, but it's a very informal sort of a session. So if you've got questions, please do ask. But please wait for the previous question to be answered before you ask another one. Okay. What's the next one? How many of these have we got?
Just a couple.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those of you online, we do have chat and Q&A open and enabled. But please be aware that only the questions that are posed in the chat, sorry,
Yeah.
Freudian slip, sorry. Only those in the Q&A, funnily enough, will be answered and posed to the panelists. We may not be able to get through all of them, but we will address as many as possible. Those that are asked in the chat, unfortunately, we won't be able to get to because we expect quite a few. Okay, please do chat though. Don't, please do chatting away. Excellent. That's probably how we know where people are coming from. Okay, so I think I said that one.
Yeah, and I
Hey.
think that's it for this slide.
That's it.
Yeah.
Excellent. 3 ground rules. Okay. So what's next?
Different flavors next.
Different flavors.
Oh, there you go. I mean, and that's me as well. So my word to move on is final. You have been warned. Yeah.
Tom is our invigilator, our moderator, and our facilitator. So he's in charge for the Q&A. So we've probably heard of some types of architects already. That's one. Has anyone heard of any others? Exactly. Thank you. Fantastic. Excellent. Yeah. So all the ones that were listed on the event listing. Plus some more. We thought we'd start off just by framing the conversation by explaining, what might be understood as a technical architect, what might be understood as a business architect, a solution architect, and an enterprise architect. So we'll go quickly through these. So I'm not going to read off the slide, but a technical architect is very much more technically focused than the others, and so goes somewhat a lot deeper than others. But they have a tendency to work with other types of architect in your typical day-to-day business. They need to have a view of strategy, but not necessarily be influencing that strategy. They tend to be the ones who are executing on it. Yeah. Deep focus, and typical responsibilities are again technically focused. So the things that you would expect in that domain. So security, both high and low level design, system integration, landscape, sometimes infrastructure, environments, deployments. The actual delivery of what you're designing for, as well as the design. Then what about a solution architect? I think most of us have heard of a solution architect, but one thing I would typically see is that depending on who you speak to, you'll get a different explanation of what a solution architect is. There's loads of nodding heads. Yeah, because I don't think there is one specific definition. So what some of these points here being sourced from multiple places and sort of collated to provide a bit more of a consensus view. Okay, but you will still see, if you go out there in the market, that you'll still see a variation in perspective on what a solution architect is. So they typically fit between an enterprise and a technical architect, as they have a bit more breadth in terms of their scope and understanding of the problem space. Typically not just one technology as well, as again, some agreement there. And because of that, with a slightly more functional or business focus, you tend to see a bit more gap fit. Most of you understand what gap fit means? So it's how does the combination of technologies fit into the business, business requirement, or not fit, actually. What is the right system? I don't like the word right, but I get what you mean. Best. Oh, for those of you, least worst, I like that. That's very good. For those of you on their CTA journeys, the word optimal comes up quite a lot.
So next up, we have business architects.
Business architects. There seems to be a bit of a black box, not literally. But it's a critical role that frequently gets forgotten. and it tends to be spread amongst other types of architects, but actually there's huge value in it being a dedicated role. And they typically act as the bridge between the business side and the enterprise and strategy side, focused on the organizational goals. Why is that?
What's that? Oh.
And by the way, governance is a big thing for business architects. That's why. Okay. No, not at all. But it's one of the concerns. You probably noticed that some of the other ones didn't factor that in as much, I would say, but certainly a big focus for business architects. And then finally, enterprise architects. So somewhat the broadest understanding of the technology landscape and the business vision. But also with an understanding of how the company works. So what are the regulations, what are the policies that they put in place? And that's because it's not necessarily, we talked about functional architecture as one, being multiple technologies, but the enterprise architect also looks at the infrastructure and and a lot of the governance as well, and also the journey to get there. So transition states and how we're going to move between them. Okay.
We have 2 bonus ones.
Oh, we got 2. Yeah, go ahead.
So do you typically see that being related to a certain size of business? Could you be an enterprise architect at a bit smaller?
I'm going to say hold that question because that's a great question to ask our enterprise architect. All right. So we do have some bonus ones, and there are lots of other flavors like crisps that you could also look at. So data architect being one. I'm not going to go through these. I think we can share the slides afterwards. But these are more specifically focused on a particular domain. So data architecture is one, integration architecture maybe another. If we keep going.
That's it until.
Okay, so others that you may also see, marketing architects out there. You might see security architects out there. You might see, what else did I think? Experience architects. Has anyone heard of that? That's yeah. So communities, communication,
User experience as well.
And strategy, things like that, is becoming more and more of a thing. Network architects, yeah. So I sort of bundled that into security architects, but you're right, and it's similar sort of flavor. But you can probably see there's a lot more than what you would typically, expect. Sure. Solution architects, close. Yeah, not sure. Sorry, the question was, where would a functional architect sit? Are they a mix of solution and business architect, or I'm not sure. I tend to see functional architects being solution architects. It's sort of interchangeable, but we have solution architects who you can ask that question to. So. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Solution architects also should need some kind of technical knowledge.
Ah, interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just set the context, set the frame, and the reason for doing that is because we have some esteemed friends of the community that we would like to bring up and actually be the subject of those questions, at least to start with their opinions. So.
Ready?
We have, first of all, Martin Viskachil. Would you like to come up? Grab a seat. We'll come down the line. You can do an intro in a minute. We have, should we do, actually, yeah, do your intro now.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here and for the invitation. So my name is Martin Viskachil. I'm technical architect, but I typically introduce myself as Salesforce Architect because I've been in multiple roles: solution architect, technical architect, solutioning architect, which if you haven't heard about before, enterprise architect as well. Currently, I work at IBM as an associate partner. I've been in consulting for about 5 years, work in PwC before and Salesforce for the mothership as well. Shall I also say about the journey, how I came to EM? So if you are interested to hear how I started my architect journey, I think it was a little bit lucky because I was in an organization called Elevon, which is part of a US bank. And we were just transitioning to Oracle CRM. And at that time, I was just a compensation analyst, but I could see that our organization needed help with technical resources to help with the transition. So I started to help, and eventually I became responsible for the whole system. But it was a nightmare system to work with. And so we kind of struggled for a year, and eventually the organization decided to move into Salesforce CRM. And we're kind of running a pilot under the cover a little bit. And eventually that turned out to be a successful pilot that we implemented into full Europe team. And I was the only resource there. So I kind of got the opportunity to be everything, a BA, admin, and over time architect. And funny enough, I grew a team, and I have a member of a team here, Hari, sitting at the back, who was one of the business analysts back then, and also a technical resource a little bit as well. So I was lucky, but I think I had to kind of grab the opportunity to be lucky, basically. Yeah, so that was my journey.
Thank you very much, Martin. Who's next? Next, we have Catherine Curfey. You want to come up? I'm going to get out of the way, I think. I'll get out of the way. There you go.
Thanks all. It's lovely to be here. This is my first talk, so please be nice. So I am a Salesforce solution architect at Slalom. I've been working with Salesforce about 14 years and relate to a lot of what we've said about there's lots of different flavors of solution architects, and depending on the projects, etc., you're involved in the size and the blend of the team, you really can change that role quite a lot. I had a slightly different start to Martin. So I joined a grad scheme at one of the large consultancies, and I was quite lucky that they sent us around a range of different projects to kind of, or technologies, to see what sort of clicked with us, what sort of made us interesting. And I was lucky enough to come across the software as a service team, as it was called then. We were just starting up. And then sort of started getting involved with another cloud CRM, and then transitioned over to Salesforce and basically worked my way up. So started maybe doing a little bit of build of some stories, and then sort of started taking on some of the design of some of the stories of certain areas, and then started taking over more sort of projects, and then sort of getting bigger and bigger. So quite a gradual journey. Always worked in consulting. Worked across a few different companies, from the larger global ones to the smaller ones, and I've sort of settled at a mid-sized one now, which is great. But yeah, that's pretty much my intro. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And next we have Laura.
Hello. So I'm a bit of a fraud because Sam contacted me and said, oh, we're doing this thing about architects and you're a business architect, so we'd really like you to come and join our panel. I went, oh, what? No, I'm not. What's that? I've never called myself that. I don't know what that is. A mutual friend of ours who worked with me very closely at the time, she was at Make Positive, our managed service partner, assured me assured Sam, I am one of these. So you may be an architect and not even realize it. So my profession is I work in marketing. So I'm currently the EMEA and APAC marketing director for Satinia, formerly Financial Force. No one's ever heard of Satinia. So that's who we used to be. We rebranded a month ago. But I'm actually not here to talk about that. What I'm here to talk about is a project that I was involved in that changed my life and changed the future of the organization I was part of at the time, which was Aston Martin. So some of you may have been at World Tour in 2016, I think it was, where Aston Martin was the featured brand and we had a DB11 on the stage, our CEO on the stage, all of that stuff. So I was the project manager and the product owner for that implementation. And before I did that, I'd never heard of Salesforce. So it was an absolutely wild ride. The biggest project I've ever done. It was 18 weeks start to finish, tiny, tiny budget, less than £1 million. And yeah, it literally changed my life. Since then, I've worked for another automotive company, terrible. Very briefly left in my probation period because I was like, you guys know, because their enterprise architect was absolutely wedded to SAP, soz, but no, and was going to build a customer service center in SAP. No. So I didn't stay there very long. I then went to Salesforce and I worked for Salesforce for 2 years and now I'm at Stinia. So there you go. So I'm this apparently, but we'll see.
Thank you very much, Laura. And last but not least, Ram.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, everyone, for inviting me here. So my journey has been quite different from all of you. I graduated from my college in computer science in 2011. And just after my graduation, I joined one of the SI company called Infosys in India. And the way they do that, based on the demand they have with the client, they basically train you on different stuff. And they chose me for Salesforce. We call it back then as SFDC. We didn't even know what Salesforce is. We were the first batch who were getting trained to do the projects in Salesforce. So that's how my journey started in Salesforce in 2011. I was trained as developer. So in my initial days, I started as developer, progressed and I achieved, advanced developer quite soon. And within 3 years, I was the first one out of 3,000 people in my organization to do the advanced developer. And that came with certain responsibilities. And actually they started, because we didn't have many advanced developers at that time. So they gave me more and more of tech lead responsibility. And I was sent to on-site to Netherlands to do automotive projects for one of the clients. And that's how I naturally transitioned to the tech lead role. That's where I did the tech lead role for a few years. Then I moved to UK and I joined one of the big four consultancy, Deloitte. And that's where I did a couple of architecture roles. Deloitte had so many big digital transformation projects, and all those projects actually gave me a good chance to become the different, to explore the different technologies, not only the Salesforce, because we were doing multiple things. We were doing front-end transformation, back office transformation, mid-office transformation. That included various technologies, not only Salesforce. Although I was a part of Salesforce team, but I was the one who was kind of talking to all the different teams. I was talking to the different stakeholders from the client side. We were trying to understand the problem first, where they want to go, trying to get the end state of like what they are planning to do in next 2 months, 2 years, 5 years down the line. So that actually interested me a lot, and that's how I kind of stepped into understanding more of an enterprise role. I became CTA in 2021, along with Sam. We got the result on the same day. Yes, and yes, and after that, I have been mostly doing the big transformation projects, especially in advisory capacity. Most of my roles includes as like program architecture lead, where I would be put in a box with the client enterprise architect, mostly to end execute end-to-end architecture. So that's how I have become enterprise architect.
Yeah. I just noticed, Sam, that was missing in your slides, program architect.
Program architect, who are they?
How could you have missed it?
I should have actually, that's a good point. That's very Salesforce specific one, I think. So, okay, cool. All right. So you leading this?
Yeah.
I'll do, okay, right. So let's kick off then with the Q&A. So first of all, why don't we start with Louise, your question initially. Are you good at catching?
No,
I think the better question is, am I good at throwing?
Are you good at throwing? All right, go on, let's go. Hey!
There we go.
Okay, if you can hold that one as well, because that's for the
Oh, okay,
live
all right.
stream.
You didn't throw this at me. So yes, thank you. So Ram, I think my question's directed at you, because when I think of enterprise architect, I think of someone who is working at a very large business. If I'm honest, I think about someone working in-house rather than, I think you're all at consultancies, aren't you? But for an enterprise architect, do they need to work at a company of a certain size to have that title, essentially?
Well, it depends. I think you're right in most of the sense that you will see mostly the enterprise architect in-house. But the way I have seen from last 2-3 years in my role, that we would put generally in a box, in a box with the client. They will have enterprise architect who knows their technology, who knows their infrastructure end to end. And also, if you see the infrastructure, enterprise architecture is kind of the bridge between the IT and the business. So they already have the enterprise architect, but in terms of Salesforce context, if you say, so we need to be kind of T size. So you would be quite deep in Salesforce. At the same time, you would know the different technologies which are announced Salesforce that you need to implement. So you are right in a way that, of course, enterprise architect needs to be working in a big organization, because that's where they have to manage multiple different technologies and need to suggest different visions for the client. At the same time, because I have been doing those roles, so now I understand the importance of having the enterprise architect in the smaller organization as well. Because if you are just working as a solution architect or technical architect, we are very much focused on the ground, ground level, like the technology you are working upon. I always use an analogy that you don't have the helicopter view. If you're at the ground, you are just seeing what you can see. But if you think about the helicopter, what you're seeing, what is happening on the ground, the ground looks very different to you. So we need to know the vision, of course, what are the company's vision, what are the company's goal. It's not only about the technology that we work with, what the client will have at that time, how can we maximize the resource what they have, how can we maximize the technologies they have rather than bringing all the new stuff. That's where I see enterprise role is very important and very critical.
Which is interesting, because I'd say that to me is one of the characteristics of an architect full stop. Like having that, like looking across what everything that that business is, using all of their requirements, all of their technologies, and not just looking at Salesforce. But thank you for your answer, that helped.
Just to clarify, I work at ISP, but I was in-house at the time.
Yes, as to Martin, yes.
Business architect.
Yeah, the A word. Yeah, perfect. Right. So next up, I picked a question from the Q&A box on Slack. Slack. So we're going to pass the mic down the line. Are there specific documents each role needs to produce? Which role and documentation overlap with architecture versus design versus build versus physical implementation?
How does it and architectural domains work together?
I'll start because I'll probably be quite brief. So I think from my perspective, one of the biggest jobs of the business architect, I think, is to act between the project, the implementation, and the business, manage expectations, but also do a bit of a sales job. And obviously I work in marketing, so marketing, and really get the hearts and minds going. So I spent a lot of time doing slide decks, writing comms plans, working on change management. And I suspect the answer will be quite technical in terms of project plans and Gantt charts and budgets. But actually for me, what was really important was to connect with both the leadership team and also end users emotionally and make sure they understood their part. Otherwise, what would happen is we would implement the project, our fabulous team would disappear, and we'd fail because no one would actually use the amazing solution that we'd built. So yeah, that's.
Thanks. Anyone that knows me know I love documentation. It is like my bag. I'm like, if you've got a picture, it's worth 1,000 words. It really helps everyone understand what we're doing. So from a solution architecture perspective, I love to start with a capability map. So you've got your high level capabilities and your features underneath them. And that really gives you like the framework and the anchor for the whole solution and the build going forward. You can pin everything off it, all your solutions, your presentations, all your estimates. You can convert it into Jira and tag them as epics, etc. And it just really creates a great framework for everyone knowing that they're talking about the same thing when they're saying some words. The other good document I like is obviously the solution design or the blueprint, which you also often produce at that discovery phase. And again, linking that in with the capability map and doing the design at a capability and epic level and starting to give, and this is touching on your guys' area as well, you've obviously got your lovely, your ERD and your high level design and sort of a bit of a, you know, this is the business view of what this epic is trying to, what it needs to do. And then this is a high level view of how Salesforce or the other tools are going to meet it. So typically that I'd be quite involved in that as part of a discovery, but I think the joy of these documentations as well is they should evolve throughout the project. Nothing should be something you create in a phase and then is throw away. So for example, those solution designs, when done at epic level, as you get into the build, you can then evolve that to the next level down in like a Confluence or a wiki or something to then document the rest of the system. So you've got a nice level of traceability from sort of the capabilities and the features and therefore the requirements, I suppose, through to the different bits of the solution and how they're all met. And again, doing your estimates against them, you can compare your burn downs in Jira. You can tell I love documentation. So I think as a solution architect, they're probably the main bits. Obviously, you've got your user stories as well, which I think we often oversee a lot to make sure we're getting the right detail. And I suppose the benefit of user stories as well is you've really got to do that as AI wants, so you're making sure you know the business value of a requirement, which is so key as well, because I've worked on so many projects where people don't really understand the value of the so they don't really understand why they're building the requirement. But yeah, I think that from my perspective, they're probably the main bits of documentation.
I sort of want to ask the audience a bit. Could anyone sort of suggest any documents that you've found in the past have been the most effective or some of the most effective ones?
The functional design document, which talks about the entire user journey along with the system implementation, whatever we have done at a very high level with all the architecture diagrams and all, that will makes more sense rather than the system architecture design document, what we would call it SAD. That will be more on technical in nature, but if I have to share something to the business, I think the functional design document will make more sense to it, because even the end user who doesn't know anything about the application, they can understand better with that.
I'd say a RACI. So you understand who's responsible for what they're going to do, who's signing off on stuff. Yeah, that's the most important document.
As time goes, for me, it's key decision document for the project, because otherwise you have to explain all the same things to different people again and again and again.
This one? Not my first time.
Right. Let's see if this works. See, I would, and maybe this is the solution architect in me, but the LLD is what I would classify, because I just like designing and kind of putting that solution on paper. I think it's really important to get that right as well. Low level design.
Yeah, and on that, actually, the one thing I forgot is the process flows, which obviously we're all designing a system for users. So actually, it's great that we have all the ERDs and the designs, but we're actually having that process flow. So you understand the journey through the system, which can then be used not only for the build teams, but for the change and training teams later on, et cetera, as well. Because I suppose at the heart of it, we're always trying to develop something for the users. Yeah, it was your comment that reminded me of that.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's very interesting, right? The type of documentation you mentioned here, especially in the audience, like RACI or the burn charts, because to me, they almost sound like it's to do with governance. But then you may think as an architect, sometimes it may not be your main responsibility to look after the governance piece, but if there's nobody else on the project, you may have to chip in to make sure the project is successful. The next thing I would, or the angle I would like to bring is the phase of the project, because if you think about the start, if I work in a pre-sales role where we, as a consultancy, we may be just negotiating with the client on the solution and the scope and the system components that will be implemented. There will be some preliminary system architecture that needs to be documented and that needs to be sign off, including statement of work, and high-level design is usually part of it, or it can be in a very early implementation phases in the blueprinting and discovery. And then you may have the implementation. So that's where low-level designs and ERD documents or data models and system landscape are the two major artifacts for me, and also for those on the CTA journey. They know that these are the two main artifacts to get right. And recently, I've been studying a lot about industries like public services cloud, health cloud, consumer goods cloud, and so on. And I noticed that all of these solutions are so heavily based around the data model. And even after the CTA journey, I realized, like, if you can crack and understand the data model, then everything else follow. And that's including your solutioning as well. But yeah, you do need to link it back to your user journeys and to the overall process flows as well, because I also noticed that on some projects, people, especially in agile delivery, they just tend to focus on user stories and they solution the user stories themselves, but that doesn't give you the understanding of the overall solution, right? So that's incomplete. So there is always need for the high level design. And oftentimes on a bigger projects, you also need DevOps documentation as well, because that can get quite complex at times. And if you're onboarding a larger team, you do need to have some documentation to give them on day one, so they get up to speed very quickly.
Yeah, so if I add the enterprise architecture lens in that, so before we go to the detailed design, like what we are going to do in the DevOps or whatever. So the way we start, that we have a vision. Like when we discuss with the business, what do they want to achieve in next 2 years, 3 years, and how they would they like to remain competitive, they will have a vision. So mostly we start with the vision, we create some kind of, not the end state because that is always evolving, but some kind of state where they want to be. If they want to transform their service part of the journey, if they want to transform the marketing part of the journey. So we kind of understand the vision, what they have. And then we see, okay, to achieve that vision, do we need to go in the straight line, or can we have the zigzag line as well? Because not always you will be able to go to the straight line. You have to do the tactical stuff to achieve that strategic stuff. So those things we have to do. So we also create basically phase document, that if you want to go to the end state, and that end state is going to come in next 3 years, then what are we going to do in next 6 months, and what are we going to do in next 1 year, 2 year? How many systems we are going to acquire, how many systems we are going to retire, and how will those happen? So these are all things we do first, and all the documentation and everything we create first. And then we basically think about the technology, whether we should go with the AWS, or whether we should go with the Salesforce, or whether we should utilize the existing infrastructure that we have. We do the technology mapping later once we understand our end state. So this is something very important from the enterprise.
Cool. Thank you. I'm going to ask that as we keep going, if we can keep our answers as brief as possible. Okay. We may not be able to come to everyone for an answer to the same question.
I've got a really good
one
question.
thing.
Sorry.
Yeah, one second. One thing that I just want to reflect on for a minute is a lot of what has been said now is explaining a trait of architects that is pretty typical, and it's a willingness and a dedication to communicate. And a lot of the documentation and a lot of the diagrams are facilitating that communication. Communication of complex concepts, but in a simple way. And that's one of the sort of traits of architects that is pretty common that they're good at. Okay, I think we've got another question over there.
Yes, it was sort of a follow-on to the documentation
Ah,
part,
cool.
and I just wondered, and it kind of follows on from the vision part of that around success metrics, and in particular the customer experience, because you said around designing for the user, which you are, but the customer experience ultimately will be affected. So if you're doing a cost to serve, for example, you can't forget about the customer experience. I guess who would look at that? Or would you all look at that, and then where does that fit, I guess, in terms of your sort of priority ordering of documentation and what you're doing?
Who wants to offer a,
So of course, so that is customer experience, and the adoption is also one of the very important part from the enterprise point of view also. Because whenever, like I mentioned, enterprise architects is kind of acts as a bridge between the IT and the business. And business, they don't care about what technology we're using. How that is going to benefit the users who are going to use the system, that is very much important for them. And adoption is something that we track, and that every business wants to track, and they do implement a lot of stuff, and that's what we try to do from the very beginning. That okay, my customers, my users have been using this particular SAP system, and now they need to suddenly move to Salesforce. For us, for the business, it's just an investment they are making, quite a big investment. But ultimately, the users who are going to use will have to go through a lot. Then thinking about the journey, how we are going to do the communication, how are we going to make them feel that they are also part of the journey. This is very, very important. And also this will come from top to bottom, how the top managers, the top leaders are communicating, and these things to the bottom, how you are creating an excitement, what are the journey and pathway you are making them so that it can easily adopt, and how you are tracking the adoption. That is also very important, getting the feedback at the right time and what you can do to evolve those systems. That's what.
excellent. That's why I said at the very beginning, I think there is such a thing as an experienced architect that is emerging, if not already there, that is not being sort of fulfilled. I definitely think that is there. Exactly that. Yeah. I've got a question there. 1 second.
Yeah, thank you. It's back to the original question. If we was privileged enough to have all of this skill set on one project, how would you all actually work together?
Great question. Who wants to tackle that one?
I think it's down to the basics, isn't it? Really? I really need the mic, to be honest. And you tell I work in marketing. I know how to project. Yeah, I mean, I think it's down to really clear roles and responsibilities, and staying in your swim lane, but having each other's back at the same time, and understanding the strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, I think they're quite clear, actually. You've just got to have that collaborative mindset.
Yeah, that's really the point. So the collaboration I get, you're all a team. So that's point one. But secondly, is it led from here, enterprise, or has it worked?
I don't think someone's in charge. Well, I guess it will vary as well on the project, right? Because if it's a massive implementation, but I think we all have a different strength and weakness. So, for example, in the business, I would know how my users would react to a certain thing. I would know, okay, we can't replicate the way they work today because that's not how Salesforce works, and it'll just cost a fortune and we're not hard coding, that kind of stuff, right? That's my wheelhouse. But in terms of, how to build that, no clue, couldn't tell you. That's where I'm going to rely on the rest of the team.
It starts from a scratch, if this same big engagement starts from a scratch, like a big client has come to you and said, like, yeah, and it is say that, okay, we want this project to be brain. Let's start from now. If it starts from point zero, who will proceed what, and where do each one will talk? Say all of you are in one company, example, yeah. Okay.
Business starts because it starts with requirements. So what's your business issue? Why are you changing? that's a business question. So I would say that's me.
Yeah, I would second that. And also enterprise architect mostly work with the business architect first. If the business architect is present with the client, not all the business will have the business architect. Sometimes enterprise architect also needs to wear that hat or work with the different architect or different people in the team. But yeah, I'll say the stage is not the sequence. The stage would be the first the business architect or enterprise architect will work together, and then it comes down to the low level. What do we want to do after doing the technology selection? What do we want to do? Then the solution architect will come as well. And sometimes solution architect will work hand in hand with the technical architect also to have the end-to-end architecture. That's
And then
all.
it goes back to the business to say, yes, you've answered my question. Yes, you've met my requirement.
So there could be industry focus as well within that. So you may have an insurance background, it might be an insurance product. So you may have be able to fill some gaps for the team. So it's an upskilling, as I'm saying, as the project goes on. Would that be fair to say?
You are defining the strategy first, that in which direction you want to go. And then it will come down to the implementation. And that's when the deep expertise will come into the picture.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add quickly to that yeah, RACI matrix definitely, but I think also like what was discussed here definitely is right, but that's the theory. In practice, you may get a different variety of roles on a project, and just because somebody has a certain job title, that doesn't mean they have certain skills. So at the end of the day, is that it's about understanding what is the goal of the project and how everybody can chip in to make the project success. So you kind of need to understand the dynamics in the team and how can everybody contribute. There's oftentimes a lot of overlap, so you kind of need to synergize together with the rest of the team.
Okay, any more questions?
Hello, everyone. As of now, I sometimes listen the one word like UI architect. So UI architect is the part in between which works like in between solution architect and business architect, or it's a separate one. Because UI architect is not like this dependence on the Salesforce only. So on any big transformation project, multiple technology and legacy system also used to be work, but their job supposed to be give the proper UI from top to the bottom level.
It is very much related to the question the change management for which you are building the system, how they are going to react to it, whether it would be totally new to them or whether it would be an adaptive thing for them. At the same time, you are also making things easy for them, So that's why UI architect come into the picture, because they don't care about the technology much, but they care about the user experience. Even one click extra might annoy someone, so and a 10-second load or whatever load, the experience might annoy someone. So that's why these things come into the picture, and adoption and for change management, it becomes very critical. So that's where it is very, but the better you start thinking, the sooner you start thinking about the UI, because that's ultimately you are building a product and you have to thinking about those things from the very beginning. So not be left for the last.
I just wanted to add to that, if I may. I've said it before, and I'm glad other people are saying it as well. When you're designing a solution, you're designing for the emotional needs, functional needs, and technical needs of your users. Your users have emotions. You need to consider the human element of your design, and you're designing for humans by humans. That's really super important, because the clicks thing, how could I do this in fewer clicks? How could I make things easier? Or could I just automate this process altogether? Obviously, your users are going to love you if you do that. So, yeah.
They're going to love the system too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's deep, isn't it? That was really deep. I feel emotionally drained. No, but seriously, great questions, and thank you very much for a lot of the discussion and consideration in asking those. So at this point in time, I want to say thank you to the panelists. We're going to take a short break for some more drinks and some food. We focused in the first half of the session on a lot about the skills and the role that architects play. In the second part, after some refreshments, we'll start to talk a little bit more about progression, careers, development, and that sort of an aspect. But for the time being, thank you very much to the panelists, and thank you very much to you guys. We will be back shortly. Oh, I wanted to say, please do approach any of the panelists if you want to know more on a one-to-one basis or whatever. Please do go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. There's some really good questions about it in the chat. I also went through Francis because I'm like, you know, I don't get everything. Francis, are we ready? Yeah? Push it up.
Someone,
Yeah, that was me.
someone help
Turned
me
it
with
off.
technology, will you? Welcome back, everyone. Thank you very much for coming back. Hope you all had a little bit of a break, something to drink, and come back refreshed. Excellent. I'm standing in the middle because I was going to have a big architect cuddle, but It, yeah, I don't know what's the collective term for for a group of architects. I knew it. That was it. Excellent. Expensive. Yeah, fantastic. All right, so welcome back again. So first section, we talked a bit more about the roles of the architects and their responsibilities and how they're most effective. I do have some more questions on that, but we'll see if we can fit them in at the end. Maybe some challenging ones for you guys. The second part is all about career progression, development into the role, and so have we got one on QA first to start off with?
I do, yeah. This is from Anthony. What's the best way to bridge the gap between the theory of certification and the practice of implementation if you are not actually working on a relevant project?
Who wants to take that?
We would like to take that first, yeah.
Great question. I think it's all good doing the learning, but I think you go through a different thought process when you actually when you're given a problem and you try and solve it. I think there's various volunteering things you could do. So there's various programs where you can volunteer some of your time and you're helping like a charity or something, so you can get that hands-on experience whilst doing some good. I think that's always a good option. There's always trailheads, there's joining some of the communities or sort of like hackathon style things, but for Salesforce. Mentoring is a great one too. Yeah, I think it's such a great community and there's always so many people that are willing to help, but could also do with some help. So that would be my starter for 10. I don't know if you guys want to add.
Martin, do you want to add?
I'll totally agree. I think it's interesting, right? Because the question was stated in such a way that you obtain the theory and at the same time you don't have the opportunity to go on a project. I'm trying to picture why would you not go on a project, right? So I think it depends where you are, if you are working for end customer or for consultancy. Usually in consultancy, there is plenty of opportunities. If you have the certification, so to speak, it's just a matter of time until you get pulled into a project, because there's usually not enough skilled resources to do that. But if you are at the end client and perhaps you obtain a new certification and you're just trying to put the theory into practice, then I would totally agree with what you said. Like you would be looking for volunteering. I don't know if you just want to make up some personal project and build a demo for the giggles. It's possibility, but what motivation you're going to have, whether you can sustain it, that's a question, but it's my thought.
That's a you say catch and he throws it. That's yeah, thanks. Okay, so just to promote another group, so the Women in Tech group, which is run by Louise. Your last Women in Tech was, remind me the subject, it was using your hobbies to advance your learning, and that's very much like, so I know I've mentored people that have done that, and I know other people that have. So Todd, who runs the developer group, another group, him and his son have a developer org to track his son's Pokemon, right? Doesn't have to be a relevant Salesforce project. It can be something that you're interested in, and if you have the sort of thing, I'm not interested in Pokemon, but Todd is, and that means he's engaged in it, and you can think it through. So I think there's definitely some scope for kind of even if you're not able to work on a professional project, doing your own stuff for shiggles, it's all good.
Cool. All right. Too short.
And now I have to move, yeah. But I think with that, I think it's been touched on already, but the kind of community sprints that I'm going to call them that are ran as well. And I know Salesforce Org do this, and there's another one, and I feel like Vanessa in the audience is going to know the name of it.
It's the day after World Tour. still sign up for.
For the Salesforce.org one,
Yeah, just Salesforce.org.
there's another one. Community sprints that you can get involved in and help with.
So I know that, so Salesforce has been working with Click.
Yeah,
So is that
that was the one I was thinking of, yeah.
So I'm a Click coach. So Salesforce has been working with an organization called Clicked, and Clicked has a bunch of coaches, and they're all free experiences basically, but it's the idea that you can learn Salesforce and kind of have a mock Salesforce project in a safe space and get feedback by a Salesforce professional. So they'll team you up with a whole bunch of other people. You'll get the, you know, the sorrow and the joy of working on a consulting team and get to actually deliver a Salesforce project after a few weeks, which is actually really cool kind of as a mock project, and you get a certificate at the end, all free, and Salesforce helps fund it.
You do have kind of exercise before, so you try yourself, you create, you know, a flow or a feature or an object, a solution, and then you join the discussion to understand, to share, and to learn how to do this better.
Cool.
If you just go like Salesforce, but this to me, this is the advice I give people starting out. Was the question not to become an architect? So surely they would have Salesforce experience they'll have to be working on, but maybe not exactly, Martin, as you were saying, not someone who is in the position to work on a kind of project that's big enough to move them up a level.
Yeah, so I'm going to offer a slightly different view on that. So for those who hands up quickly, who knows what the CTA credential is and what the journey is? Wow, look at that. That's amazing. Okay, so part of the CTA journey is to do mock exams through using scenarios that are written by Salesforce and actually written by the community. For all intents and purposes, those scenarios are business scenarios that actually set out a bunch of requirements, both from a licenses, from a integration, from a data, from a reporting, from a business process, all the way through to delivery. Actually, what you can do is you can take one of those and try and build it. Try and build it yourself and see how far you can get. And wherever you get stuck or you're not sure, use the community to sort of connect with people who are in the roles that can help answer those questions for you. And then take that and continue to try and build it. Just the act of having the conversation and discussing what the requirement is, you'll gain insight into what's the level of consideration, what options are open to me, how might I, what are the trade-offs between those two different options. But you'll also probably connect with people in different roles as well, which is what you would normally get if you were working for a company as an architect and trying to do that on the ground. So actually taking that scenario, and there's probably about 50 out there now, something like that, various different sizes. Some of them you will get stuck because you need like enterprise orgs and specific product licenses to be able to do it. But you can still approach some of the core concepts that set you on your path as an architect. And get the feedback as well. Yeah, that discussion is key.
I was at London's Calling recently, and there was a great kind of working session on that, where we went through a scenario and kind of picked it apart almost word by word to kind of understand the clues in the wording. And like from the initial bit, we could tell it was B2B, for example. So, and there are also other resources and things like that out there, like the Ohana Slack, and also the Architect Ohana Slack as well, where people kind of post problems and kind of get together and collaborate on experiences. I think something that Salesforce suggests as well is kind of already been hinted at, but like building your own personal portfolio online, like on Experience Cloud. Maybe you want to get to grips with Lightning Web Components or whatever it may be. You can just go and do that and have that as your kind of online CV.
Run a hackathon, that's another way of doing it, is to actually maybe reach out to your preferred charity or whatever and say, we're going to run a hackathon, just give us challenge us with some problems, just problem statements, and we'll work around those and take them all the way through the process.
Can I just add to it and kind of say, I think all the questions have been technical, and actually there's other skills as being an architect, like how do you convince people? How do you demonstrate that these options are the best options? And how do you communicate to different layers within the organization and present a story that's convincing and it links to those organizational goals that you know, and links the enterprise architecture plan, and you can call those out. Yeah, so I think there's more scope, and those skills are harder to get right without practicing and doing it for real and going down that road. So just not forgetting that it's not all technical. Yeah, okay, yeah, cool. Yeah.
Francis, I would like to react to that if that's okay, because I think it's very interesting, because the question was posed from the perspective of gaining certification first,
and
and
then
then getting the practical experience. And everybody answered from technical perspective because everybody thought it's about getting the hands-on, right? And you are totally right. Architecture is not just about the technical experience. It's a lot about communication, soft skills, business acumen, all that. So are there any certs? I think the only cert that measures or kind of scores you on the other soft skills aspect is the CTA, right?
Well,
are there any other?
Yeah, so you can be a strategy designer. And that focuses on roadmap, getting C-level
Correct.
executives on
Yep.
board. You're tailoring your different communication techniques. So that's a newer one, kind of falls under the designer track, but definitely I think it's kind of applicable for any architect because it's, I guess, represents that maturity like that every architect should have, right?
Thank you. So my question is, let's take us back in time and let's imagine that you're all just starting your journey in Salesforce. What is one thing that you would have done differently if you know that you would become an architect or whatever you are today?
For me, I guess when I started my career, Salesforce was quite new. That time, I didn't even know that I will survive that long, you know. I was always thinking whoever was coming to teach us, I was always asking one question, what is the scope of Salesforce? Because I had not known about Salesforce that time. You know? So if you would have asked me 12 years ago, I would not have answered that. But how, you know, I have always found that you have to be curious all the time. That is something very much important. Although I was a developer, very much focused on Salesforce and very much focused on the project that I was doing. But we had a community like mail, you know, you can mail anyone in that company and you can answer the questions like we have the team channel and all that right now. So those kind of things were kind of very exciting to me that time. So I was trying to understand, okay, what are the other people are asking other questions? And, you know, I was trying to do those questions. I was trying to answer those questions. And if I was not able to answer this question, I was trying to make myself learn those things. That's how I learned things quite quickly, you know. That time we didn't have the kind of clear pathway for the Salesforce developer or architect and all those. So we had to basically figure out ourselves. And also one of the good thing which happened because there were so many people who were quite new to Salesforce. So they all came from Java or .NET and all that. They all came from different perspective, you know. In the way, the things that you develop in Salesforce or do in Salesforce, there is a Salesforce way, but there is another way also which other technologies are using, you know. So getting to know, talking to those people in as early you can do in your career, like talking to different people, getting different perspective, to solve the different problem, the same problem, how they would do that in the different technologies. That will take you a long way. You will know what is happening at the other side and why Salesforce is doing this a particular way. Why can't we do that in different way? So knowing different options and thinking about why that option is better than another, those things had helped me. And I think that's why being curious is one of the trait I would say we all need to have. No matter where you have reached, but you need to have those things.
Very much. I think we've got another question at the back.
Thanks. I'd be really interested to hear about a challenging situation in your career and how you use the tools in your architectural tool chest to turn the situation around.
Who wants to take that one?
I'll take that one. This is about IT. So we were talking in the break, and I passionately believe, unsurprisingly, business architect, whatever, I believe that most Salesforce implementations should be run by the business. They shouldn't be IT projects. Obviously, IT are a massive stakeholder, but it's all about the business because you know your requirements best. And in the project at Aston Martin, when we were shopping for a CRM solution, our IT department were determined that they could build a CRM solution that would be better than Salesforce. I'm not joking. Absolutely believe that. And I said to them, brilliant, knock yourselves out. You've got all the knowledge, right? You've got all the knowledge. Our head of IT at the time had been there for 17 years. So again, all the knowledge. I'm like, you should win this easily. Of course they didn't. We scored everyone, matrix, requirements, whatever. No. Imagine then how motivated they are to help you implement the solution you've just given to another vendor. That was quite hard. And I went from literally not knowing what an API was to being described by my CEO as the most IT literate, non-IT person she'd ever met in the space of, I don't know, 3 months. And that was because I had to sift through so much spam of no, we can't, no, we can't, no, we can't. And I developed this approach that I use today on all sorts of things and with my team. And it's actually really powerful. So you can have this one for free. I just say to them, let's imagine the answer's yes. Let's just imagine. I know you're saying no, I hear you. Let's imagine it's yes. What do we need to do to get there? And my challenge was IT. But you know what? We got there. We got there on time. We got there on budget. And we delivered about 25% more functionality than was in our original plan. So it worked. Mic drop. I just leave that there.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Any more Q&A on the?
Yeah, I'm gonna. I feel like I enjoy speaking into the box more than I enjoy speaking into the mic, so I'm going to choose that one. There was a great question that I'm now trying to find. No, it's not a question. That's a fact. Please, can you tell me the steps to becoming a solution architect? I am currently a solution engineer, less than a year, and I'd love to know the career path time certs. Thank you. Yeah.
It's a great question. I actually think there's multiple paths to becoming a solution architect. It a little bit depends on where you're starting on that journey. Some people, for example, like I came straight through the graduate program and started doing functional work and then just took on more and more responsibility and then somehow became a solution architect. Other people transfer from industries and perhaps they bring that industry knowledge, but they need to maybe up their sort of Salesforce knowledge. What I would say is I think a solution architect, half of it is about the way you think and approach things. I think being a solution architect, you need to be able to look at the big picture and the detail. You need to be able to analyze and assess sort of all the requirements, see if you can see if there's something in the system that you can reuse. Do you need to build? So it's very much about how you approach it. That's obviously the mindset rather than, I suppose, the technology view. In terms of specific certs, I think the standard Service Cloud and Sales Cloud are always good ones to start with, because they are kind of the bread and butter of Salesforce. They will give you the most exposure to different projects and experience. And I do really think it's, nobody wakes up one day and just says, I'm going to be a solution architect and is one. I think it's about getting that practice and working on projects. And, you know, the more you do it, you'll make little mistakes along the way, but I think that's how we learn too. So I think it's really about embracing the mindset, working on the soft skills and the certifications. And yeah, just enjoy doing it as well, because that's another key thing. I think sometimes skills come naturally to you and then you enjoy them. And I think that's a big thing too.
Excellent. On that point, I'm going to nerd out a little bit, because I get so much satisfaction by making one system talk to another. I cannot tell you. You know, it's like different languages and everything. Anyway, I'm going to throw this one out to the audience. Do certifications matter?
Well, depends if you're in consultancy or not.
Well, it depends. I said it depends if you're in consultancy or not, because you might get hired for that because they get points on their partner program with Salesforce. So you might get hired for your certs. You might be pushed around to have certs done if you're in a consultancy. It's not an indication for your breadth of knowledge. It's not an indication for your capabilities, but it's definitely a good to have, and it depends on your goals within the industry.
Yeah, I would like to touch on one topic, what is basically why certifications lost the value. Consultancies push so much, so people are frustrated and taking all the opportunities to cheat and do all other things. So, and all the ecosystem basically, we're just losing the value. And one of the reasons I see that as a consultancy and how we push people to get certified in whatever way just to get more points.
Sorry. So when I've hired people, what I see is that, you know, I'm hiring them and I'm able to assess their technical knowledge. So it doesn't matter to me, because I can kind of say, what do you know about this? And if they're bullshitting me, you know, it's fairly obvious to me. Whereas if you're non-technical person, and you're trying to help, yeah, sorry, I was looking at you as I said that, and you're hiring techies, it's harder to pick that out, right? And then, you know, it's probably more important to an employer at that point to have that assurance of a certification, because, you know, it's a indication of value. But, you know, if you've got a hiring manager that is technical themselves, they don't need it.
I just kind of wanted to tag into on that, because I've got a box, you know, I can just in case you weren't aware. So yeah, I agree to some extent with the consultancy thing. I have been kind of pushed through certifications that I perhaps didn't want to get or weren't on my trajectory. But as a result of those, I was then able to apply that experience. So for example, I went up the application architect route and didn't really get like why sharing and visibility wasn't the entire cert. But now I do. I've learned that, and I think about data skew almost every day. I dream about it, write articles, sales will spend about it. Like, it's super important. And I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't kind of been pushed into that cert. So experience greater than certifications, perhaps, but the two are very kind of hand in hand with each other. You can do the cert first, then get experience, or you can be experienced and then do the cert.
It's not more about feeling how you felt in that way when someone say, look, you have 3 months, you need to get this certificate, you have another 3 months, you need to do that. It's not adding like.
No, I think coming from like consulting companies for the last 15 years, like 10, 12 years into Salesforce, no organization
no organization with whom I was working on, they actually forced you to do that until unless you don't have any knowledge. If you have gained a knowledge in a particular project and they would have known that you are working on that particular engagement, then they tell that it is good to get certified, because that's when they project you to other clients. So until unless, if I am a fresher and they tell them, okay, you are a fresher, why don't you do a developer one? Just like that, they won't tell you until unless they put into a project and they assess you and then they tell you to do it. So certification will help you to move forward, because you will gain the knowledge both of project as well as the way you have to talk to the client, etc. Because you will have knowledge on what kind of questions you need to ask, etc.
So my question,
if I
on
could
the
just-
certification, it is back to the panel, why you're all are hiring people, and do you see at the number of certifications or the certifications as a criteria when selecting a CV?
Can I?
I went through 9 admins in 4.5 years at Aston Martin, partly because we were in gaming in Warwickshire, which is a lovely location, but it's in the middle of nowhere. It's not a hotspot for Salesforce. Also because the team relocated to Milton Keynes for 2 years and then moved back, so that cost me people. Oh, I need a mic, sorry. Thanks, sorry. And I wouldn't interview anyone if they didn't have an admin cert. But to your point, a cert is just the start. And to your point, it proves nothing. And I interviewed people who had that cert who were total numpties and didn't know what they were talking about. And that was obvious. I have no certs. I'm a ranger. That's it. I'm not an admin. I'm nothing. And it's not enough to have a cert, right? You have to have the experience. And a lot of people don't. So buyer beware.
So I just wanted to add that I think rather than looking at what cert to do next, look at what you're enthusiastic about, what you like doing, and just explore the ecosystem, find things you're interested in, get the experience, and then look for a cert that kind of crystallizes what you already know because you've done the stuff and you're enthusiastic about it. And that way, when you do get to being an architect, you'll be an architect in something you actually love, rather than just, banging along doing something you don't really like. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree with you, Martin. I think it's a good approach to have. But to the original question, I was said that certificates don't, whether they matter or not. To me, they totally do matter because it's the easiest thing to measure. And like it was said, yeah, it's almost the hygiene factor, right? It doesn't mean that if you are certified, you are great. The same thing I would say about experience. Just because you've been 10 years doing something doesn't mean you are doing it well. I've seen, all these that are doing 20 years something and they don't have enough motivation to better themselves or to do a great job. As a hiring manager, I definitely look at certificates, but equally, I double check that the candidates have qualities by testing them and grilling them in the interview. For me, certifications play a big role in my personal success and my personal career. It definitely enabled me, and it's not just certificate game in terms of the numbers. It's about enabling me, giving me certain path to follow and learn new topic, learn new cloud, and then while I was doing that, I enable myself to participate and contribute on an upcoming project. If I didn't earn that cert, nobody would notice me, nobody would involve me in that project in the first place. So it's enabling me, it really works for me, but definitely in consultancy, I would say it plays a bigger role because somebody asked the question about, I think it was you, what you would have done differently at the beginning of your career. And I'm thinking I spent about 6 years working for the end client. And when I was there, I was not expanding my horizon. I was just focused on Sales Cloud because that's what I was responsible for. Thinking back, I would have expanded more earlier. I only started to look to the broader knowledge when I joined consultancies. And yeah, Salesforce was not that big 6 years ago, but yeah, I think the certificates allow you to grow bigger and broader knowledge as well.
Thank you, Guy. We're just going to do one more and then we'll move on to a slightly related but different question. Is that me or you?
I'm not sure.
It was the box.
I want to go back to that question that was asked on the Q&A by the solution engineer, how do I become an architect? And for me, the most important thing that differentiates an architect from a developer, from an engineer, is asking why. So as an engineer, as a developer, you get a user story and you ask, what am I doing? What's the input? What's the output? And you try and find the best way of doing it. But thinking as an architect, thinking of the big picture, you start by asking, why am I doing this? What am I trying to achieve here? I think Laura touched on it briefly, but that's for me is the, if you try and think like an architect, why am I doing this? Because sometimes you find that you're putting a lot of effort into something that actually is not the best way. As a solution architect, you might think that there is an out-of-box feature instead of development. As a technical architect, you might think that you need a paradigm shift, or you need to think longer term about a different issue. But I'd say if you're trying to grow from a developer or engineer into an architect, that's start thinking why, start looking at the bigger picture. Where do I fit and why am I doing this?
Sound advice. Okay, so I'm going to target panelists. So, slightly related. So to develop as an architect, what would you what would you say are the key measures of effectiveness or quality to develop to be a good architect?
I became from developer to architect, so I can tell you what changes I had to do. When I was working as a developer, most of the time I was getting a job and then I was working on those as code and everything, and that's what I was doing. That everything in the background, I was getting it and then I was doing it. Nobody was knowing what I was doing. It's just that I was communicating through the code and deployment and all that. But when you step towards the tech lead or tech architect role, most of the thing that you looked at is your communication, how you communicate what you have developed. You cannot talk in the technical language to the business. They would not understand what the flow is, what the fill is most of the time. And if you need to know, because ultimately you are working for the business, you are working for the users who are going to use the system. They might not know the field, they might not know the record type, but you need to communicate to them to get what they actually want. And that was the biggest challenge I had, because when I was sent on site, I was, I was 3 years, I had only 3 years experience as a senior developer. In my initial days, that was the biggest challenge I faced, that whenever I was going to talk to the business analysts or business people, I was using Salesforce jargons, and that's the feedback I got. Then suddenly I had to change my strategy, that I was trying to understand what do they actually want. You understand the problem first, and then you go and do in the background, you translate those, you do the mapping yourself. But the step, how you start the communicating, basically, generally someone also asked that how to become architect. You find in your consultancy, if you're working for the consultancy, go and join the forums, talk about the different solutions. Even if you have developed something in your own as a developer, go and talk about that with your colleagues, present what you have done. Go in the habit of presenting and telling people what you have developed. A story, it can be a small story, it can be a big story. Even if you are not if you're not exposing yourself, you will not know, basically. And find the forums, find the opportunity to, these days we have got so many different community events also. That's where you can go and talk about the topics, or at least learn about topics, or maybe I can ask the questions, And especially if you start presenting and talking to the different people, you get confidence also. And that will basically help. And that has actually helped me stepping up in my career, becoming a different from developer to architect, working on my communication, how I communicate to the different stakeholders who may be technical, who may not know anything about Salesforce or any other technologies. So communication is a big role.
Okay, I'm gonna.
How do you measure that? Because the question was about the effectiveness and how do you measure?
Yeah. Okay.
So the communication, is there any way to measure it?
Yes.
Oh, do you want to
For the cube.
The way to measure it is you put yourself in a position of every persona in your business, and you play out the explanation. So you need to explain to the end user. If it's a salesperson who has no idea what you're talking about, if your explanation is good enough and they understand why you're doing what you're doing, great. You get the point. Same with the CEO, same with the finance, same with everything. And if you don't have access to these people, try kids. Kids are great substitutes. Like the younger they are, the more abstract you need to be with your examples. You think it's not going to get you anywhere. As a former primary school teacher, it gets you far. So learn how to communicate with kids. You learn how to communicate with CEOs.
Yeah, I think I explained single sign-on to my son recently. No comment. No, I did actually. He did get it eventually. Yeah, yeah. It took like 3 or 4 attempts, but anyway.
I think respectfully, I disagree with you slightly. I think what you're describing is good change management, actually. To me, a measure of success is 3 things. Adoption, right? Who wants to build a solution that no one uses? So let's make sure our users are actually logging in, preferably daily. The second one is business value, and that's not pounds and dollars necessarily. It could be a CSAT score, and I've forgotten what the third one was. There's always 3 things. Oh, the third one.
Question differently. I thought, how can you measure successfully your communication?
And effectiveness as an architect, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was.
And the third one, I think, is a legacy. So particularly with a product like Salesforce, you don't do a fire and forget. And I think one of the biggest mind shifts that an organization has to make when they implement Salesforce, and one of my key stakeholders used to say to me, when's it done? I was like, no, never done. This is a cycle. Our customers' expectations don't stop increasing, so neither does our need to meet them. So 3 things.
Yeah, I like that one.
Could
Okay,
I
I'm gonna.
just- Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, go ahead.
I love the thing about personas. That is really important. And I was thinking about that as well. Like your sales manager is going to have completely different set of objectives to your service agent. Also, the kind of other part of this that's kind of really, I think, important is the point that's gone. Yeah. I mean, business value. Oh, talking in metaphors. If you're talking about technical things, talk in metaphors. Like leaving the oven on is equivalent to having an automation that's running all the time. Talk in metaphors. Customers get it.
Yeah.
You've got to stop waving your arms around because the
Yeah, sorry.
screen is like that. So it's not happening.
Okay, so from one solution architect to another, if you are not in a developer role or a technical role, such as a product ownership role or an admin role or something like that, and you are switching or trying to progress to be a solution architect, how much coding or developer background is actually needed to be a good solution architect? Do you want to...
Sorry. Great question. I don't think you need any coding skills to be a solution architect, if I'm honest. I think we've touched already that everyone's got a slightly different blend of skill set, and you get some solution architects that can code and do like to do that, but like to focus in on the business problems and the high level solutions. And then you've got solution architects that like to do the configuration and came in that route. And then you've got solution architects that came more from the business route and have that really good industry knowledge, but know how to sort of map to Salesforce. So assuming when we said developer, we mean sort of coding, I don't think that is needed for a solution architect. I think if you've got that, embrace your skill and use it to enhance your role as a solution architect. But I don't think coding is needed. I think you need the base understanding of the platform, and you need to understand how the bits work together. And I think you probably really need to be able to configure the platform, because if you can't do that, you can't do your mock-ups to see if things work, and you need to understand how the platform all knits together. But I don't believe you need to be able to code to be a solution architect.
And just a shout out to the fact that my route to solution architect was via consultant. Like, you don't have to be a developer to then become a solution architect. Yes, I can understand the code and the theory behind it, but I can't write it. That's not the expectation here. I'm trying to think about, are we actually going to do it in code or flow in the first place? Yeah.
Architect.
What I'm seeing is I am solution architect as well for the end user, and what I'm seeing in general in the job ads or something like that, there is a lot of misconception and understanding what is the Salesforce solution architect does and what is the role and scope. Like a lot of them expecting you to fully understand integrations and all this kind of stuff. Some of them asking coding. So everywhere where you go, the understanding of it will be completely different. As a Salesforce touch, a solution architect is only clicks, no code. That's by the Salesforce understanding, but everywhere else that will be very, very different. And we might expect you to code, and like I said, so there is a big misconception between all the roles where you go.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's so confusing because the same term in one company means something completely different to another. And I found that when I changed companies 2.5 years ago, that just the terminology means something completely different to everyone. So I think that's why it's important when we're talking about solution architects to know, yes, you don't need to be able to code, but if you're talking about it with a particular like client or company, ask some questions to validate that you've got the right understanding and alignment on what a solution architect is, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, and I think there's also quite a stark difference between B2B and B2C. From what I see being favorable on the B2B side, kind of less code type skills on that side. And on the B2C, it's kind of almost more expected. And thinking about the exams as well, because I've done both B2B and B2C, didn't pass B2C because that's not my arena. The B2C was more heavier, like Salesforce exam on code and which APIs to use for which use case, whereas B2B was not as heavy on that.
I would agree on this.
Yeah, the B2C is hard. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we have time for one more question, either from the audience or from the Q&A. Take that one, yeah.
Someone wants to, who is into a program delivery and a product ownership, if he wants to start and go into a business architect role, what is the transformation that, or what does he has to learn and unlearn?
Well, remember, you're talking to someone who doesn't believe she is a business architect. So I don't know. I mean, it's terminology that I'm unfamiliar with, business architect. And I almost feel like you can self-identify, right? I was saying to Catherine earlier, I was joking and saying I'm going to stick that on my LinkedIn profile as another thing I've done. It isn't another thing I've done. I just think if you know your business well, like I knew my business processes inside out and backwards. I'd worked across a number of teams. I was known for delivering. I'd done projects before internally around change management. I think you really need to have negotiation skills. You need to be able to influence. You need to be able to upwardly manage. You need to be able to communicate complex theories in words of one syllable. You need to be IT literate. It's quite a tricky mix, honestly. But if you get it right, it's amazing. I know a couple of people who I would now, I know what it is, describe as business architects, and they're generally from within their company, because I don't think otherwise you can have that really deep knowledge, which is what you need, but also the trust of the people around you that actually you've got them. And there's a bit of a leap of faith that happens here, right? Especially with the first project. So you actually have to have people that trust you, and you go, look, it's going to be okay. And they go, all right, then we'll give it a go. I mean, I don't like it, but okay. So I don't know if that helps, but there you go.
Yourself not agreeing with what people are saying and being comfortable to challenge. It's when you move from being, I'm going to say developer, I don't mean that any disrespect to developers, but when you start to take on an architect role, you're starting to go, actually, why?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Positively.
Yeah.
Then 10 minutes later asking the same question, but why? I'm finding you get a different answer to that question and saying, okay, I think we're actually agreed we don't know the answer to this question. Be not necessarily light in a project. That's another unfortunate role that we play sometimes as business architects. You're not necessarily most light person on a project because you scratch the open sore that everybody knows but wants to ignore. So you're constantly pushing that button, and then that's when you can say, that all you're doing there is really pushing what the requirement is. Yeah, so what you're doing is you're actually understanding what the need is, what the business challenge is, to then move on to the next technical area, which may be the solution, but people strive to a solution. It's a very common process, and people have got lots of certs and have been in touch with us for a long time. I see a session, write a solution. And I'm so sorry to say that. I've seen it so often when I sit there and you're going, no, stop doing that. We don't know what the full problem is yet. Once we've understood the full problem, back to Laura's perspective, and validated with my users and actually observing that situation, what it is, then I'll come to the table and say, I agree, this is the challenge.
Yeah, I think the concept of 5 whys. 5 whys. If you tell me you want something, I can say why 5 times, and at the end, I now understand exactly why. I'll go and build it. Like, I'll go and design it, or whatever. If at any point along that way, it falls down, then there's not enough, basically. But I really like what you said about success factors and of an effective architect, and the longevity of of what you've designed and built is a good measure as well, because it stands the test of time, scale, and performance, and meeting the business's needs and adoption and so on. So really good. So thank you very much for all your questions and your input. Thank you also to our panelists. A round of applause for Laura Bowman. Thank you to Catherine Curfew as well. Another one from Martin Biscotil. And our enterprise architect, Ram Babu Singh. Excellent. So this is the section where we move on to news.
Yeah, just community events this time. So let me, for everybody on the call, reshare my screen.
If you guys want to jump down, you can.
Okay. I feel like I'm comfortable here, so I'm just going to stay here now. Yeah. So lots of exciting things coming up. So make notes of these dates for your diary. First one, Women in Tech user group on June the 20th. Yeah. 21st for developers. 27th for admins. 27th as well for the joint Pardot and marketing party. So, yeah.
I was going to say, that's a choose your favorite child, that one is.
On the 20th at lunchtime, they're doing the non-profit one in the tower, and I'm talking. So it's a 2 user group day for me.
Double trouble. Yeah. So on the 28th, this is a Salesforce event. It's actually bringing together Salesforce, MuleSoft, Slack at the Salesforce, I want to say Bluefin offices. Tableau. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, celebrating.
Representing Salesforce, you've got Emma representing Salesforce.org, you've got a lady called Freya representing MuleSoft, and a lady called someone else who I haven't met yet representing no, Freya's representing Tableau, and someone's representing MuleSoft.
Cool. Yeah, and that is of course on the eve, or the eve before World Tour, which is on the 29th. Data Tribe on the 4th of July. Yeah. I couldn't quite fit that on the thing, but I'm glad somebody heckled that anyway. That's great. 13th of July for the marketing user group. 18th for the admin. 25th for the Pardot. The user group is still officially known as Pardot. Salesforce haven't enforced that new name on the user groups just yet. Well, I can't. There may be something happening on the 9th. No? Okay. Just pretend that was never there. Okay. Right. And on the 10th, and this is, I tried to, I was originally in gold, but it just didn't look right. So I did teal instead. This is our super duper awesome meetup where we as London architects are joining forces with Pardot user groups, marketing, non-profit, and education user groups. I believe in-person tickets are sold out already. We do have virtual tickets available as well. And hopefully it's a bit of a different mix of user groups kind of coming together. Yeah. you have anything to add, Sam?
No, I think we had some issues today with people who wanted an in-person ticket and there weren't any left, so they signed up anyway to a virtual ticket and then rocked up. You may find the same thing happens then. It's probably better to go on the wait list because then we can add you to the in-person and invite you rather than, you know, just as a suggestion.
You can send a message once
Yeah.
people not attending, just let them to move away because
Yeah.
you don't want anyone to take anyone's space.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. Yes. And Francis.
Anybody not get their socks at London's Calling?
Yeah. So, yeah, Francis is now lobbing socks at the audience. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, right on the head. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is one more slide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep going.
That's it. This is it. This is it. Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. So this is my new copyright. So there's actually, and just sharing this really, because not a lot of people know that there are 3 ways to report on your Einstein activity capture information. On that trend, I've got a YouTube channel going as well, so I'm just going to plug that too, about native reports and dashboards with Einstein activity capture with your emails and your events in native Salesforce reports for the first time. And also hands-on with user access policies, which I hope everybody knows about and what that is. If not, again, scan the QR code. Yeah.
Excellent.
Whatever it is, Louise is talking about it. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
What have we got next?
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent. Come and get your swag. There's socks over here. There's stickers over there. Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. Can you all make sure that you leave your name badges? It's really important that you leave your name badges in the museum again. Yeah, but it's really important that we need them back. Okay. Thank you very much. And good night.
Do you have fun?
Yeah, it was good.
I'll have you back. Yeah, it's been.
This one's the best one you've done.
Yeah. Because of the Tom Howard content slides, but
in general, different. It keeps them in place. I think that's what gives value. We all have different experience from a different level. I'm a user, you guys consultants, and our experience is like different. We have the same title, but it's like
yeah, exactly. And that's exactly it. I think it's interesting because like the Salesforce definition of solution architect is different.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that's why no other people get confused.
But it's